You are standing in a town square, and the crowd is cheering because another human being is about to suffer. The victim may be a thief, rebel, heretic, prisoner of war, or simply the wrong person who annoyed the wrong ruler. The method has been carefully prepared. Ropes measured, wood stacked, iron heated. Officials dressed for the occasion. Someone designed this. Not in a moment of blind rage, but slowly, calmly, with planning. Humans do not only hurt each other when they lose control. Sometimes we build a machine, write a law, invite witnesses, and call the pain justice. So why are we capable of creating punishments so cruel that even reading about them centuries later makes your stomach tighten? The simplest answer is anger. But anger is only the spark. Cruel punishment usually needs something larger. Fear, power, obedience, distance, and a story that makes the victim seem less human. Imagine an early village with no police force, no prison system, and no reliable way to track someone who runs away. If a person steals, attacks a neighbor, or betrays the group, the community cannot lock him away for 20 years. So punishment becomes public. The goal is not only to hurt one person, it is to frighten everyone watching. One broken body becomes a warning sign. Do this, and this will happen to you. Public whippings, executions, mutilations, stocks, cages, and displayed bodies all carried that message. The victim was being punished, but the real audience was the crowd. Pain became advertising. A ruler with limited soldiers could not stand inside every home, but fear could. If people remembered the screaming in the square, the ruler did not need to visit them personally. They carried him around in their own heads. That is why punishments became theatrical. A quick death might remove an enemy, but a slow, visible punishment could control thousands. The cruelty was not an accident. It was the point. But fear alone does not explain the creativity. Why invent complicated suffering when simpler methods already existed? Because punishment was also a performance of power. A king, emperor, lord, or court wanted to show that resistance was useless. The punishment had to say, "We do not merely defeat you. We control your body, your reputation, and even the way people remember your death." That is why some punishments attacked identity as much as flesh. A person might be shaved, branded, paraded, dressed in humiliating clothing, denied burial, or displayed after death. You were not just dead. You were officially an example. And somehow, bureaucracy made this worse. We like to imagine cruelty as the work of wild-eyed monsters. But many brutal systems were operated by ordinary people doing separate jobs. One person wrote the accusation. Another approved the sentence. Another built the device. Another tied the prisoner down. Each could say, "I only handled my part." Nobody felt responsible for the whole thing. This is one of humanity's most dangerous tricks, dividing guilt into small pieces until everyone can carry a little without feeling the weight. Modern psychology has shown how strongly ordinary people may obey authority when responsibility seems to belong to someone above them. Give a person a uniform, a command, and permission, and behavior can change very quickly. But permission becomes even more powerful when the victim has been pushed outside the moral circle. Before extreme punishment becomes acceptable, people are often taught that the target is not quite like them. The victim becomes a traitor, barbarian, witch, criminal animal, corrupting influence, or danger to the whole community. Once a person becomes a category, empathy is easier to shut off. You are no longer hurting Thomas, who has a mother and 2 children. You are punishing the heretic. Language does a remarkable amount of dirty work. Governments and institutions rarely describe cruelty honestly. They use words like correction, purification, discipline, order, duty, or mercy. Mercy was especially flexible. A ruler might reduce one horrific sentence to a slightly less horrific sentence and expect gratitude. You were technically being spared, although your future had just become a long argument with pain. Religion could intensify this logic when punishment was presented as protection of the soul or defense of sacred order. But when spiritual certainty joins political power, punishment can become terrifyingly absolute. If authorities believe they are defending not just a law, but the universe itself, compromise begins to look sinful. The person screaming is no longer evidence that the punishment is wrong. The screaming becomes evidence that evil is being removed. War makes the moral circle even smaller. Soldiers are trained to see an enemy as a threat before seeing him as a person. Once hatred becomes routine, punishment can move beyond military goals. Captives may be tortured for information, revenge, intimidation, or entertainment. Entire populations may be punished for resistance. The official explanation is usually security. Here is the problem. Almost anything can be called security when the people making the decision are not the ones being crushed. Cruel punishment also grows from revenge. If someone kills, betrays, or humiliates us, simple removal may not feel emotionally satisfying. We want the offender to understand the pain they caused. But pain cannot be measured neatly. Grief has no ruler. Anger has no natural stopping point. So revenge escalates. A family wants justice. A crowd wants a spectacle. A ruler wants obedience. Crowds matter because emotion spreads. A person who would never torture someone privately may cheer in public when everyone around him is cheering. The crowd gives anonymity and permission. It says, this is normal, this is deserved. You are one of us. And once punishment becomes entertainment, the victim's suffering competes with the audience's appetite. Ancient arenas, public executions, and punishment parades turned pain into a social event. Human beings can get used to almost anything, including horror, especially when horror happens on a schedule. Cruel methods also continued because institutions copy themselves. A punishment used by one ruler becomes tradition under the next. Officials stop asking why it exists. They only ask whether the paperwork is correct. Tradition gives cruelty an old costume and makes it look respectable. This is how it has always been done, maybe one of the most dangerous sentences ever spoken by a comfortable person. Now, some famous punishments were exaggerated by enemies, later writers, or storytellers who understood that horror sells. Certain devices displayed in museums may have been rare, reconstructed, or invented after the period they supposedly came from. Some accounts of exotic torture were propaganda meant to make foreign peoples look savage. But the correction is not comforting. We do not need every legendary torture device to be real. The documented record already contains public mutilation, breaking on the wheel, impalement, burning, forced labor, starvation, whipping, exposure, and executions designed to last. Humans were cruel enough without help from legend. The final reason may be the hardest to accept. The people who created these punishments were human in the same ordinary way we are. They ate meals, loved their families, worried about money, complained about the weather. Then they approved suffering because it protected their position, obeyed their beliefs, satisfied their anger, or happened to someone they had been trained not to pity. That does not mean everyone is secretly waiting to become a torturer. Most people feel empathy. History also produced reformers, witnesses, rebels, and ordinary citizens who refused to participate. But cruelty does not require a population of monsters. It requires a victim made distant, an authority made sacred, a crowd made excited, and enough ordinary people willing to say, "This is not my responsibility." The most frightening punishment device in history was never the rack, the wheel, the stake, or the iron cage. It was the human mind after it found a reason not to care.